guys, thanks for joining me. Slightly different filming setup today. We've got to that time of year where the light is just horrendous again. I've got really good light in this room because I have it coming in from two sources, just natural daylight, and I still can't find my ring light that I needed to film. Oh, Reg, have you got your foot stuck? Reg is sitting on the bed here. I'll just wish you around so you can see him. And he loves that throw on the end of the bed, and he gets his claws stuck in it. And he can't get them out, and he does this with his paw. It's really cute. Anyway, yes, we're in a different room. And I didn't deliberately put this jumper on to match the background. It just happened like that. I should probably add. Don't try to blend into my backgrounds generally. So I've got something a little bit different for you today. I did a while ago my life before YouTube, which I absolutely loved filming. It was like a whistle-stop tour through my life and how I got to the point of when I started YouTube and everything that had happened to me. And that went down really well. I've just noticed the gas meter cupboard is open. I really must shut that. Sorry, very distracted. So yeah, that went down really well. So I thought it might be fun to do sort of probably a series of story time type videos, and I was going to do one all about my wedding. I've been talking about this for a few weeks, saying I'm going to do it, and then I thought, well, really, first of all, I need to do the story of how I met Ashley. So and then the wedding would be a natural sort of follow-on from that. So that's what we're doing today. I'm telling the story of how I met Ashley, and I like the idea of doing these videos sort of not just for you guys, although I love all the comments and everything and the interaction and making the videos and, excuse me, all that stuff. But I also like the idea of future generations. My grandchildren might watch this and learn all about how I met their granddad. And that's kind of cool, isn't it? Because we never had that sort of thing. I would love to have been able to see my grandparents or great-grandparents talking about, you know, their lives and stuff. It would have been amazing, wouldn't it? I think the internet's a real good tool for that sort of thing. Anyway, I've already rambled for 2 minutes and 2 3/4 minutes nearly, and I haven't even got as far as starting the story. So let's get to it. So I went to the Polytechnic of Wales for 2 years, which is what universities used to be called in the dim and distant past, polytechnics. And I met a guy called John there who I had quite a serious relationship with, and he came from Torquay and I came from Bournemouth originally. And after we finished university, he moved back to Torquay in Devon and I moved back to Bournemouth, and we both spent a summer working, and then we were still together and we wanted to live together, so I moved down to Devon to live with him. We had a bit of an on and off relationship, John and I, for, let me think, I just got to anchor myself in the year so I can figure it out. I finished Polytechnic in 1988, so this would have been the summer of 88, or September, October 1988, we moved in together down in Devon in a rented flat. And it didn't go so well. We were young, we were naive. I don't think he was working at the time, so I was the only one bringing in money. And we were very much in love, but not particularly compatible in life. It was a relationship, looking back, that was doomed to failure, if I'm honest. So yeah, we moved in together, and then I think we stayed there for about 3 or 4 months, and then that didn't work out, and I moved out. I rented a room in another house, and John moved out as well because he couldn't afford to pay the rent by himself. But we were still together as a couple, but just not living together. And then we lived together again, and then we didn't live together. So it was all a bit messy. So during one of our times when we weren't living together, John went and rented a room in a house that belonged to Ashley, who was a friend of a friend at the time. Now, I kind of already knew of Ashley through John again, and I'm pretty sure, we've talked about this since, the first time that I met him was John was round at someone else's house playing Dungeons and Dragons. Oh my God, am I married to someone who plays Dungeons and Dragons? Dear, oh dear. And I went to pick him up for some reason. Maybe they were drinking or something, I can't remember. I went to pick him up, and Ashley was one of the people who was there in this house. And I don't particularly remember anything about him at this time, but then subsequently John went and rented a room in this house that Ashley had bought. And this particular house that Ashley went to live in this room that, this particular house that John went to live in that Ashley owned, Ashley was renting out all the rooms. Ashley was living in the loft for some reason, I think because he didn't have enough money to pay the mortgage, and so he'd rented out every single possible room to get the rent in to be able to pay the mortgage. So he's sort of semi-converted the loft. It was a grotty house. God, it was full of grotty blokes when I look back at it. We still own the house now. Ashley's mother lives in it now, bizarrely, but yeah, we do still own it. But yeah, John moved into this house that Ashley owned, and I got to know Ashley through that. Ashley at the time was with a longish term partner who he'd been with for, good 5 years, I would think at that time, called Tracy. And there were some other people living in the house as well. And by this time John moved into this room, and I was settled. We were still together as a couple, but just not living together. And I was settled not far away in a flat that I rented with another girl whose name I can't remember. I was trying to remember it this morning when I was thinking about making this video, and I can't remember her name. I can still see her face, but I can't remember her name. Anyway, I used to spend a lot of time round at Ashley's house with John, and all the people in the rooms became sort of friends, and we had this big communal room that we would all spend time in together. Very student-y lifestyle. Even though we finished being students, it was that sort of student-y lifestyle. And Ashley and Tracy and John and myself used to spend quite a lot of time together as two couples. So that was really how I got to know Ashley. I then wanted to travel, and I ended up going off working on the cruise ships again. I will link my other video, my About Me YouTube video, before YouTube video. I'll link that below or up here or something, so if you haven't watched that and you want to go and watch it, you can do. But I wanted to go off and work on cruise ships, and that obviously involved going away. John was very upset about this. By this time the relationship was, I don't want to say in its death throes, but yeah, probably pretty much in its death throes. Much as I loved him, we just weren't right for each other, and it was really sadly, we were still officially together, but I went off for 6 months on my first contract with P&O Cruises, and obviously didn't see him for 6 months. By the time I got back from my first 6-month contract, John and I were nominally still together, and I went back to, I'd moved back to my parents by this point, obviously, because when I wasn't away at sea, I didn't want to rent somewhere in the UK to only be there once every 6 months, so I'd moved back to Bournemouth. And I went down to see John in Torquay, and we tried to put things back together, and it just didn't work. I'd moved on. It was awful. I can still put myself back in. He was staying with a friend at the time, and I can still see it now as clear as day in her kitchen. She wasn't there. It was just me and John in the house, and sort of splitting up for the final time, and it was gut-wrenching. Oh God, if I still think about it too much, I could just, it was not a good moment in my life, that one. I knew it was for the best, but oh God, it hurt. It really did hurt. Anyway, I went back to my mum's, licked my wounds, and then John sent me back all the letters, because I'd been away for 6 months. I'd sent him all these letters, and just got to interject here, I'm thinking about this. I realise this is a story about where I met Ashley, but you will need all this backstory to when you see where it's going. I realise I'm talking about John a lot, but it will all make perfect sense. It will. Yeah, John sent me, he was gutted. It was me who'd really instigated the breakup. He wanted to stay together, and it was, although he realised it wasn't working properly, and I still wanted to carry on the ships, and he didn't want me to, and it was just all very, very messy. he sent me back a great big envelope full of my letters that I'd sent him, and that still actually makes me quite, I think it was to provoke a reaction and see all the things I'd said in these letters over this period that I'd been away, and letters from before as well. Letters were quite a big thing in those days. If you weren't, the summer that we'd spent apart after we finished university, we wrote to each other all the time. Phone calls were expensive. And yeah, it still makes me sad when I think about that. I got rid of the letters. I couldn't bear to look at them. It was, I never read them or anything, and it was heart-wrenching and gut-wrenching to get this bloody thing of all my letters back. But I still have all his letters to me, and I look back at them. I read them once every 5 years or something. I get all my letters. I've got loads of letters from lots of people, and I get them out and I read through them, and it's you know, it's lovely to reminisce. And I feel quite sad for him in a way that he hasn't got those letters to look back on, but they went in the dustbin. I couldn't deal with it. So a couple of weeks after this, I was still in a mess. I was doubting my decision about whether it had been right to split up with John. I didn't know. I was just feeling bereft, if you like. I didn't know if I made the right decision, and I phoned him, and he had completely changed in that 2-week period. He just wasn't interested. He didn't want to know. To be fair, I'd messed him about a hell of a lot, hadn't I? I'd gone off to sea for 6 months. Looking back, yeah, I think I'd have told me to piss off as well. Not that he actually told me to piss off, but he clearly wasn't particularly pleased to see me. And I just felt that real he's moved on vibe, a real he's with someone else. And although I knew our relationship was wrong and it was awful and it hadn't worked out and the splitting up was the right thing, I knew in my mind, my heart was still, you know, really, I don't know, what am I trying to say? That my heart was still a bit broken about the whole thing. So I immediately got on the phone to another friend down in Torquay. I was still in Bournemouth at this time. And she told me that John was having an affair with Tracy, Ashley's girlfriend, Ashley's long-term girlfriend. It became apparent that Ashley had found this out by going round to Tracy's house, thinking everything was all okay between them, going up to her bedroom and finding her in bed with John. Can't imagine how that felt. I didn't envy him that one, I have to say. It's fair to say that Ashley was gutted. Ashley and I talked on the phone quite a lot. This was all in the summer after my first 6-month contract with P&O. I was off work for 2.5 months before I went back for my next contract. So this was all happening in that period of time. And Ashley and I talked on the phone a bit, and he was obviously absolutely gutted. Ashley and Tracy had always written to me when I was on the ships on my first contract at sea, so they'd written letters to me as well. That we were sort of friends to that extent, you know. And I was just gobsmacked, and I think it was a bit of a scandal amongst our whole group of friends at the time that Tracy and John had done this. You know, John and Ashley were close friends, and how could he have done this? I mean, Ashley didn't treat Tracy brilliantly, I have to say. In retrospect, looking back, he was not the best boyfriend for the 6 or 7 years they were together, but you know, they were young, weren't they? What can you say? So I went back to sea for my next contract. I stayed at sea for a period of another 4 years after that. I kept in touch with Ashley. Ashley still wrote to me, obviously not joint letters with Tracy anymore, and the word on the street was that John and Tracy were now a couple. Ashley had cut them out of his life completely, and also anyone who spoke to them, his level of hurt was that deep, I think, that he just couldn't deal with it. And about 2 years after that, Ashley and I had still kept in touch. So it was about 1.5 years, 2 years. I was at home on leave in Bournemouth. By this point, I bought a flat in Bournemouth. I spoke to Ashley on the phone occasionally. He wrote me letters and I wrote him letters. And long story short, he came to visit me in Bournemouth and we got together. And I was still on the ships. We spent quite a lot of time together when I was on leave. That time I was off for a couple of months as usual, and we would spend weekends together. Ashley was working by this point in his father's business, and so he was busy all week, so we would spend weekends together. And then I suddenly thought, what are you doing, Caroline? This is completely wrong. You know, it's rebound, isn't it? Even though that there had been this period of like a year and a half or so, I thought it's ridiculous, it's rebound, you don't want to do this. And I'm really ashamed of this, but I just stopped all contact with him and I went back to sea. And I didn't answer his phone calls and I didn't reply to his letters. I was a bitch. Yeah, I'm not particularly proud of that at all. However, a year later, I was thinking about coming off the ships and coming back to work in the UK, and I realised over this time I'd sown my wild oats, if you like, for want of a better expression. And I realised that what I felt for Ashley was actually a real thing and wasn't just a rebound or vengeance thing or anything like that. And I got back in touch with him, and thank goodness he was quite forgiving and understanding of this, and we got back together. And I had to go back to sea. I was still in Bournemouth at this point, I was still at sea. I had to go back to sea for one last contract. It was for the tax year. The way the tax years fell, we didn't pay, if you're out of the country for more than 180 days a year at that point, you didn't have to pay any tax in the UK. So I needed to go and do one more 4-month contract in order to get my tax year in. And I went and did that, and I think Ashley was quite dreading it because last time that had happened, I'd gone back to sea and never got back in touch with him, you know. But it was all good. I spoke to him on the phone all the time while I was away, and came back to the UK, finished on the ships. I was living in Bournemouth. He was living in Torquay. I got a job in Bournemouth. For a year, we spent weekends together again and did that thing. And after a year, I moved down to Torquay to live in the same house with him that John had originally rented the room in and that we still own. I moved down here in 1995, spring 1995, and we got married in 1996, I think I'm right in saying. Yes, 1996. So one more thing I just want to add on to the end of the story of how Ashley and I met is that John and Tracy are still together as well. They have a son who's a little bit older than William, just one son, and they still live fairly locally. I've never seen either of them again. They know we're together. Ashley's brother has a little bit of contact with John, or has done over the years. And it's kind of nice in a way that we both ended up in long-term happy relationships, even though it all started out in such a bizarre wife-swapping type manner. So that's the story of how Ashley and I met. I enjoyed telling it. I hope you enjoyed listening to it. As I say, I will do more sort of story time videos. I love it's a fun type of video to make. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed it, guys, and thanks for watching, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye bye.